From Washington.
President, I thank my colleagues for coming to the floor to remember this horrific shooting in their state and to remember those and the family ones who were affected by this. Very much appreciate this resolution. I come to talk about history as well. I just visited a group of young students from my state, Vancouver iTech. Actually, it's the second time I've seen a group of students from this school in the last week. A group of them were here last week competing in a national history championship. And I'm very proud to say that the young women presenting a historical review of the Kaiser shipyards in our state that changed the workforce, and basically women came to the workforce during World War II, placed second in that national championship. So hats off to those young women for capturing that moment of history and explaining what it was all about. They also, the competition from Vancouver iTech Preparatory had 4 other individuals who placed in the top 10 of the subjects that they were providing. So I love that my state is focusing on history. I'm here too to focus on some history and a resolution. Today is the 95th anniversary of one of the worst economic policies our country ever made, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. Don't just take my word for it. The Senate Historical Office has characterized it as, quote, among the most catastrophic acts in congressional history, end quote. So today I'm introducing a resolution that commemorates this anniversary as a moment to reflect on the devastating impact and the consequences. It shows you what we can learn from history. And at its peak, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act placed an average rate of 20% tariffs on goods imported into the United States, just 20%. So we've had this big discussion about many other things, definitely well above 20%. The goal then was to bolster U.S. farmers and manufacturers by protecting them from foreign competition, but that goal, as we all know, if you study history, was not met. What it did instead was widen and deepen the Great Depression. My resolution recounts our major trading partners, including Canada and countries in Europe, responded to those tariffs placed on by the United States by raising tariffs on the United States exported goods. So yes, let's say a trade war. An anti-United States sentiment rapidly intensified in foreign countries, leading to a consumer boycott of American products in Canada, France, Spain, Italy, and many other countries. The retaliatory tariffs and consumer boycotts caused farm and manufacturing exports from the United States to plunge from 68%, basically $5.24 billion in 1929, to basically $1.6 billion. So from $5 billion to basically $1 billion in 1933. So a big drop in what the United States was able to do. The U.S. gross domestic product fell nearly in half, from $104 billion in 1929 to just $57 billion in 1932. And the unemployment rate rose from 3.2% to a peak of around 23% in 1932. So the Great Depression had arrived. In my state, the state of Washington, we've always been dependent on trade. Back then, lumber was our main export, and the trade war essentially destroyed that industry. Production dropped 70%, and the board feet dropped down to just 2 billion board feet in 1932, more than cutting in half what we had done before. More than half of our state's loggers lost their jobs. The unemployment rate in my state was 33%, much higher than the national average. And where do we stand 95 years later? Do we want to take a moment and understand the lessons of Smoot-Hawley? The administration is running a very high tariff playbook. The world's economy is much more interconnected now than it was in the 1930s. Uncertainty is the enemy of continued economic growth, And at least the Smoot-Hawley tariffs were set at an established rate. American businesses knew what they were standing up against and could make forecasts and plans accordingly. These tariffs in the Trump administration change at the discretion of the president, creating huge uncertainty. Small business owners in my state tell me that while the tariffs are a challenge, the uncertainty is what keeps them up at night. The administration's tariffs are on par with Smoot-Hawley era tariffs. That, the economic historians agree, that was a prolonged and deepened global depression. Last week, the president said the tariffs on China would be set at 55%. So what have we learned from this historical date? Before President Hoover signed the Smoot-Hawley Act, he got a signed letter from more than 1,000 economists. 1,000 economists sent a letter. The economists warned that raising tariffs would cause the cost to rise on consumers, farmers and manufacturers would suffer, and retaliatory tariffs would make exports dry up. And they said that starting a trade war would damage our foreign relations. As early as 1934, Congress tried to right the ship. That year, we passed the Reciprocal Tariff Act, directing presidents to reduce U.S. and world tariff rates. This year, my colleague Senator Grassley and I are trying to stop the administration by introducing the Trade Review Act of 2025 that establishes limits on the president's ability to impose tariffs. Why? Because this is the constitutional power given to Congress, not to the president. The courts have already said at certain levels that this president, as it relates to the Economic Powers Act, does not have this authority. So, out of the ashes of World War II, the U.S. led in a way of creating an open and rules-based international trading system. Tariffs were lowered in the U.S. and abroad, and falling in the U.S. made a case for a trade-weighted average of 20% in 33 to 7% in 1950 and continuing to fall afterward with trade agreements. So it means we established rules. That is what trade needs. We don't need a president whose authority isn't in this particular area to start trade wars with no end in sight. The rules-based trading system provided the stability we needed to drive investment and to drive growth. So the resolution I'm introducing today asks the Senate to affirm the importance of a rules-based trade policy that reduces production costs for American farmers, for manufacturers, and one that opens markets to U.S. exports. It is time for us to commit to encouraging trade policies, particularly when so many other countries are getting their products on the shelves in foreign markets, leaving our products at home. Let's avoid the repetition of this historical policy mistake and instead do something that reaffirms this institution's oversight of this issue and recognize the problems that tariffs are causing. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.